Hi everyone, this is Oladejo Adeyemi, and this is Insight with Oladejo. We started the concept of withholding tax, expounding on the concept in itself earlier in the month of September, and we are going to be going deeper in this particular episode. We had established before that withholding tax is not a different tax type per se. It can be an advance payment of income tax, and in some instances, it can also be the final tax paid depending on the nature of transaction. I've also said that the nature of transaction determines a lot in terms of withholding tax. Whether or not withholding tax should apply, or the mannerism with which the transaction also happened. So today we are going to be focusing on the rates. So as a business owner, what should you concern yourself about when it comes to withholding tax? The first thing is you need to fully understand the description of the service you are carrying out. You need to also know the type of goods. What is the nature of the transaction, essentially? When it comes to issues bordering on withholding tax, the first clarification to be sought is what is the transaction type? When you go to the relevant regulation, you would see that the rate has been broken down into transaction types, and then you see whether you are corporate recipient or you are non-corporate recipient, the rate will differ. So we're just going to go through some of those rates. As a general rule, the rates increased. Did I say increased? I'm sure that's what most people don't want to hear. The rate reduced for the generality of businesses and services. The rate that used to be a blatant 5% rate when you talk about contracts on goods, contracts of goods or services, has now been dropped to 2%. That's very, very vital for a business owner to take note of. And I'll tell you why it is vital. Now, before this law changed, sometimes in 2024, you've been conducting businesses with some of your partners, and the rate had stood at 5%. Now, some of those partners had configured their system at 5%. And since the change, they have consistently deducted that 5% from you. That is to your detriment. This is the time to have that conversation with them, because you are following this channel and you are a business owner operating in Nigeria. You should pick up that conversation, especially when you are supplying goods or materials other than those that are by the manufacturer or the producer, where you are trading and then you have traded goods, or services. The rate on that has been reduced from 5% that it used to be previously to 2%. So if somebody is still deducting from you at 5% on that type of transaction, you need to quickly have a conversation with the person. If what you have done is a hire or rental or lease transaction, that is 10%, whether you are a corporate or non-corporate, whether you are a resident or non-resident. Royalty, interest, dividend, and the likes still stand at 10% for corporate recipients. But for a non-corporate, you would have royalty at 5%, and a non-resident, you would have royalty at 5%. You see that there have been some adjustments, to the rates. If you have colocation and telecommunication tower services for corporate, you have that at 2%. If you're a resident entity, if you're a non-resident entity and you're a corporate, you would suffer deduction at 5%. If you are supplying or rendering services other than those specifically mentioned in the schedule, you will have withholding tax applied to your transaction at 2%. So this is where it gets interesting. So let's assume that your transaction type was not listed for whatever reason in the schedule. What it means is that if you are a corporate, then you should not suffer deduction beyond 2%. But if you are a non-resident, then it would be 5% for you. If you are non-corporate, it would be 2% as a resident, but if you are a non-resident, it will also be 5%. Non-corporate can be individuals, sole incorporation, and the likes of them. So these are the things that you need to know about. If you're in construction business, 2%. When it relates to road, bridges, buildings, power plants and the rest as a corporate, so the list goes on and on. What the emphasis here is about is that you need to pay attention to two things. Number one, the transaction type, and number two, the rates that have been applied to you. And if you fall into that category where you've not had discussions with your partners that have been deducting from you at 5%, and the rate has, now that the rate has dropped, you need to have that conversation right now. This is where I'm going to be drawing the curtain for today's episode. Until I come your way again next time, bye for now.